Hey, tech enthusiast! Coming up from 30 meters down while scuba diving gives you a lot of time to think. In fact, walking along the nice long beach here at Western-super-Mare gives me lots of time to. Where do you think? Have you ever thought of that $1 million idea? Yes, this idea could change the world, change so many people's lives, and they'll get value from it. And as a side effect, you might make a few. Well, if the answer's software, software development is expensive. So, before we go into that, let's talk about everything you need to know before you start developing software. Number one, idea validation. Before you spend a day, a week, a minute, or even some pound notes on your new idea, it's vital that you get it validated first. Sounds obvious, but so many people skip this step. You need to know that somebody else is actually going to find your idea useful. Here's the catch. How would you tell somebody about your idea without them going to run off with it? Well, they're not going to run off with it. Execution is very, very hard. And as we get into this video, you'll find out how hard that is. So telling people what your idea is, if they go, oh yes, that's amazing, then that's a validation. It's not a, oh, I'm going to go, that's so amazing, I'm going to go do it myself. It's really hard to do, as we'll get into. Anyway, so tell people what your idea is and get a gauge from that. Is it interesting? Do they find it interesting? Are they just going to go, yeah? How many people do you need to ask? A lot. So, two ways of asking is have a landing page. Landing page should say, here's a service or product I want to offer. Would you be interested in it? Give me your email address. You'll be surprised at how hard it is to get email addresses off people, even if they like you. So if they sign up for this off of a page like that, then that's a very strong validation. Other ways, market research techniques, stuff like looking at Google Trends and keyword research. Are people even looking for the idea that you've thought of? If they are, you'll see evidence of that. Of course, the strongest evidence is somebody already doing it. Are there competitors in the market already? Now, this isn't necessarily a problem. How many times have you gone down a high street and then there's been 4 restaurants all next to each other? And that's fine. They all offer something different and they're all in the same place, but they're basically offering the same product, food. So if your idea is related to food, maybe it's a new restaurant and you want to offer Indian food that's got some Japanese influence. But you get the point. There's already going to be competition in one way or another related to your idea. If there isn't any competition, you can't find any, then I'm sorry, that's not validation. That's probably a dumb idea. Somebody's probably tried to do it before and they've lost a shitload of money, and that's why you can't find any evidence. So looking out for competition. Once you've validated your idea with some Google Trends, some keywords, landing page, collecting email addresses, and seeing if there's any competitors out there, the next thing you need to do is have a minimum viable product, MVP. This is not necessarily any software whatsoever. I've seen some minimum viable products that are on a notepad. It's to give the illusion of what the app could do. If you're talking about app that will identify pictures by you uploading them, then you can probably mock something up pretty quickly that doesn't actually work but gives the illusion that it's working. Again, this is just to get people to validate your idea. And so by having the landing page, the wait list, first list I mentioned earlier, and the MVP, you should get a pretty good idea of whether you're going to have enough people interested in your idea to make it worthwhile. I know these things. It's worthwhile if only just one person does it, but it's a lot of effort to go to just for one person actually. And so by having the landing page, the wait list, first list I mentioned earlier, and the MVP, you should get a pretty good idea Technical foundation. So we've got the idea validated. Hurrah! We know what our MVP should look like. So let's talk about the tech. So this can go a lot on tech foundation, the tech stack selection. So what I mean by a tech stack is the technologies that you're going to put together for you and your developer team. Now, if you're a developer, you'll probably already have a good idea of what the tech stack should look like. If you're not a developer, I've got another video. I'll put a link in the description to tech stacks for startups, which will tell you more. But essentially, it needs to be something where you can find a good supply of developers. There's no point going for something obscure like Ruby. Not that Ruby's that obscure, but you'll find it easier to find Python developers or PHP developers or JavaScript developers than you would, say, maybe COBOL developers. They exist, but they're just harder to get hold of, and if they're harder to get hold of, they'll be more expensive. And as a startup, we know costs matter. Next up is infrastructure decisions. So infrastructure needs to be supportive when you're small and supportive when you're big. In order to give you that growth, the best thing about startups is scaling up, scaling bigger. But you want to scale in such a way that it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg, and that it's going to be easy for your developers and your infrastructure guys in order to change things too. So if you start small, you can start off with something like serverless or very small servers where they don't cost you very much, and then scale them up to bigger servers or different technologies as they go. Now, depending on the technology stack you've chosen, this can be easier or harder, but it's another consideration you should have when scaling. After all, you don't want to spend a ton of budget re-architecting the entire infrastructure just to get a little bit bigger. You want to have a little bit of forethought in that before you even get started to make it easier on yourself. And so the scalability considerations are going to be strong. How many users do you expect to have? How many simultaneous logging connections do you expect to have? Both of those will tell you how much scale you need. And because I'm in DevOps and operability, I wouldn't go very far without saying you need a DevOps pipeline. Some of my customers use a DevOps pipeline in order to test and build their new release, and then use another pipeline to deploy that release to the production servers. A bit of testing on the test servers, of course. And that's all automated in such a way that it just relies on a button press. So they're empowered to do when they need to release things, and they don't have to rely on somebody else to hand off for that deployment process. All this saves you time and money. Development strategy. You've probably heard of agile methodology. What that means is you don't know all the answers when you start. Simple as that. So one of the agile principles is we value working software and use that as a definition of progress. And there's others. You can go see all 12 of them by typing in Agile Manifesto. Together with this, because we don't know where we're going when we start out, we just know the direction that we're traveling in, our MVP, remember? Then we have sprint planning. Sprint is a way of breaking up work. You don't necessarily have to use sprints in the initial stages if you don't want to, but you've probably heard of a Kanban board or a to-do board. What needs to be done? Are we doing it? And has it been done? There's a visual representation of the amount of work that's currently being done. You don't want too much of that at once, and what we've actually done, so you can celebrate. Sprint planning just goes one stage further and says, actually, we're going to pick these items and we're going to do those in the next week or 2 weeks, however long the sprint's designed to be. And then when you get to the end of the sprint, you can see how well you did based on how much you thought you were going to do. Celebrate the stuff that you've done, and then get on with the next sprint. Also, CI/CD pipelines, continuous integration and a continuous deployment. This means that you want your code in production where somebody can use it as quickly as possible, hopefully multiple times a day, if that's your deployment thresholds and your deployment cadence. After all, once a developer's done a thing, it's of no value to anybody until it's deployed. And lastly, quality assurance. You need to make sure that testing is in place so that you don't break stuff as you go. As the Agile Manifesto says, we really like working software. As part of the CI/CD pipeline, you can have automated tests so that when somebody commits code to a repository, it's immediately tested. And if any of those tests fail, it doesn't get deployed, it doesn't break anything. It just gives feedback as quickly as possible back to the developer to say, you might want to look at that again because this is now broke. That way we can continue moving forwards with new features and fixing those bugs as soon as we find them. Launch preparation. So, as is Agile, your software should be working all of the time, but you'll want to invite your beta testers as quickly and as early into the process as you can. Now, well before the MVP is ready for general consumption, your beta testers can be there, test whether stuff is working how they like, whether they've got suggestions and feedback for you, and provide a feedback implementation for them. Either speak to them daily or provide a button that they can type in stuff to your developers so that you know what's going right and what's going wrong as quickly as possible. And the beta testers can guide you about what's working well and what's working badly. Also, marketing fundamentals. So when your beta tests have got to a certain stage and you think the software is good enough, not finished, just good enough, you can work on your marketing. Spread the word. Tell everybody what you've done. Now, there should already be a market ready to bite your hand off for this software. That's the whole point of doing the marketing research in the first place. So all we're doing is when they're saying, hey, you registered an interest in us, we've now got something to show you, come and use it. That's your big launch. If you've got enough interest to start with, it should be a lovely and glorious affair with parties abound. And a final note on launch preparation is legal consideration. Some stuff you might be doing may have a legal side effect, perhaps, on it. So it's important to check that you're not breaking the law in any area, or that if it's grey, then you get it clarified by your legal team before you go ahead. Stuff like, I don't know, copyright infringement and things like that. And so there we have it. There's my list of tech to do with startups. And don't forget those metrics to track stuff like how many people are logged in all the time, how many members you've got, how many of those are paying for membership, all those good things to see that you're on the right track. Want more answers to your questions, then you can hit me up directly either through Tech Answers Club or on my LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to help you out. And like always, may all your deployments be smooth.